Today I'm going to talk to you about the Creative Research Project and hopefully cover everything you need to know about it at this stage. So, the Creative Research Project is a fourth year module which is equivalent to 2 modules spread out over 2 trimesters. It is an opportunity to create a calling card piece of work, either as a piece of creative practice or as a dissertation for further academic study. Although the project contains both creative practice and a written dissertation, so you'll always be doing both, whichever one you preference. The Creative Research Project really should be the central focus of your final year, as it's double the credits of any other module you're going to take, and you need to bear that in mind at all times when you're working on it. The modules are driven primarily by self-directed research, so you are on your own doing independent study as opposed to being taught in classrooms with lectures. The most important aspect of the module is your relationship with your personal tutor or supervisor, as we would call it. So it's kind of a bridge between some of the work you've been doing already and what you might do in postgraduate study. You'll have regular tutorials on your work, and it's kind of up to you to make sure you have those regular tutorials, and you're expected to do drafts and work throughout the year or the 2 trimesters that you are sending to your tutors and receiving feedback on, and this will enormously help your grades. You'll need to set your own deadlines, although you'll be given a guide as to how we think you should structure your work, but ultimately it will be up to you to make sure that you get things done on time, so you're project managing your own work. So you'll need to be realistic about what you can achieve. Some of you have been doing some great research work throughout your degree, but I think for some of you this may be the module where you have to really learn what research is and how you do it, particularly related to your creative practice. These skills of researching will be useful for the rest of your life. Okay, so let's talk about what's actually in the module. And what you'll actually be doing. Your project will have 2 components, a major and a minor. One of these will be a form of creative practice, which is your choice, and the other of these will be research written up as a dissertation or a longer essay. If you major in writing the dissertation, it'll be 10,000 words, and if you major in creative practice, then your long essay will be 5,000 words. But what you need to bear in mind is that whether you're majoring or minoring in a written dissertation or essay, you're expected to do as much research for the piece of creative practice as someone would do research for the written work. Yeah, it's a creative research project. What your creative practice is about is largely up to you, and there's a lot of flexibility within this. You can do directing, screenwriting, cinematography, editing, production design, sound recording and design, or even possibly a combination of a couple of things. Ideally, the research you are doing for your creative practice and for your dissertation is the same research, so you're not doubling up on your work. So whatever you're writing about in your long essay or dissertation will inform your creative practice, and equally whatever your creative practice is will inform what you are writing about, so that it's one cohesive, coherent project. Otherwise you're going to create a lot of work for yourself. I think it's important at this stage to be really clear about what academic research is, because I think that's going to help you. The first thing to say is research is definitely not looking things up on the IMDb or reading about something on a blog. That you need to really underpin it by academic critical theory, and that's been researched with a proper methodology. The first place to start, I think, is to look back at all the modules you've done, which have all had reading lists. Hopefully you've read some of those books, but those reading lists have always been about guiding you towards different critical theories in relation to either filmmaking or film criticism. And so this is a good starting point. Another great starting point is Google Scholar. That if you type in a topic into Google Scholar, you will get back a load of essays and journal entries and books and book chapters that are scholarly articles related to what your subject is. And you can always look at the reading list or references for those scholarly articles and keep coming back and seeing patterns and going, oh, okay, people keep referring back to Lacan or Bordwell or, different theorists. I'm going to go and read that work, yeah? Okay. For your creative research project, you don't need to restrict your research to just learning about filmmaking or studying film criticism. You may direct your research towards philosophy, psychology, social science, and look at theorists in those areas as well. As long as it's clear, as long as you're clear what you're doing and why you're doing it and how your project, each part of your project relates, okay? So, I would start thinking, you can go from two different angles. Are there philosophers, theorists, or filmmakers who talk about their own filmmaking philosophy that you are interested in studying? Or are there subjects that you need to delve into or theories that will help you to write your script or make your film, yeah? So that you can start looking at that work. I'm just going to add in here that you may also want to take a specific film that you think is somehow relevant to the work you're doing or set of films, and then you can look at what's written about those films as well, or even a filmmaking technique, as long as you can find ways to connect that with critical theory and the kind of philosophical thinking that is being done about films, how they're made, how we view them, the context within them, within which they're made. Whatever you choose to focus your research on, you need to be specific. As you're going to be expected to become a bit of an expert in whatever your subject is, to know what books are out there on it, even if you haven't read them all, and to have read quite a bit. So the more specific you are, the easier it is to be an expert in that area. If you're really broad in general, it's very hard to gain expertise, yeah? So go in and be specific. I think before you decide exactly what your research topic is, spend some time looking at what other kinds of research are out there and the kind of questions that academics are posing and the way research is done in the humanities. We will be asking you to talk about your methodology, which for your creative practice, your methodology will be practice as research. You are finding something out through making, yeah? For your written work, it is usually that you'll be doing textual analysis. You'll be analysing texts, and those texts, I know it's funny calling it text, those texts are often films that you'll be analysing, or the work of filmmakers, or things that have been written about those films. Okay, I think it's always good to bear in mind that academic research is similar to writing a story. You have to know what it is about, what the journey is, and you have to have a central question. Ideally, you as the central character don't know the end point, when you start on this journey, yeah? So if you set your research dissertation question and it's closed, it's really like the answer's yes or no, or the answer's something you think you already know, you're just trying to prove a point, that's not going to be as interesting as if you have an open question that you're exploring that you don't necessarily know the answers to, and you're going to read some books and do some analysis to find the answers. Much more interesting. Okay, let's move on to your creative practice. And defining your creative practice. There are a number of options of what you can do with the creative practice element of your project. Some of this depends on whether it's your minor or whether it's your major, and some of it depends on whether you want to collaborate with other students or make a piece of work on your own. I think the key things to remember are, and this is a change this year, that if you want to make a 10 to 15 minute film, this has to be a collaborative project with other students, and they have to be working on the project the other students have to be working on the project as their creative research project as well. You know, we've had too many times that projects have fallen down because people have co-opted other people in to work on their quite large project, but because they're not being assessed for it, they drop it and the project falls apart. Yeah. So if you want to direct a 10 or 15-minute film, you have to find someone else in your year who wants to make editing, cinematography, production design, sound recording and design as their major, well, possibly minor, but as that's going to be their creative research project. Yeah. You also need to bear in mind that if you want to make a 10 to 15 minute film, if you want to write and direct a 10 to 15 minute film, there will be a selection process. And this is to ensure that the project is strong enough and the team is strong enough so that the project gets completed. So this is about making sure you pass the module, yeah, and also making sure the quality of the work stays high. If you want to direct a film and you don't get through that selection process, you can still do this. It just has to be a much shorter project, and it may be that there's less collaboration on it because the people who are collaborating are going to work on the selected projects, yeah. If you're going to major in editing, camera, sound production, sound recording and design or production design, you will need to work on at least 2 of the selected 10 to 15 minute film projects. You'll also need to write about this discipline in your essay. There's still an option to write a feature-length script, but it's quite a major undertaking to write a feature-length script, and I think people don't always have a sense of what a huge amount of work it is to structure a piece of work that's long, that is that long. So there'll also be a selection process for anyone wishing to write a full-length script, which will involve submitting a whole outline showing that the story is planned and there is a structure, yeah? Again, it's to make sure you pass the module. But you can also decide if you want to major in screenwriting, you're going to write a treatment for a film, which will be quite a long document, and either a short film script or an excerpt of that feature film script to go with that treatment, yeah? Whatever your practice is, the main thing to remember is it needs to come from a position of inquiry, like experimentation, risk-taking, exploring new ideas, trying to express a voice not usually on cinema, i.e. yours. All of that is about inquiry, so doing something new. Filmmaking is always about presenting something unique and original. Even if it's a story that's been told many times before, audiences expect it to be told in a new and different way, yeah? Filmmaking is not about copying what is already out there, and this is even more so when you are in academic context and you're studying filmmaking. We expect you to be trying to do something new and to have questions that you're trying to answer. This year, you'll need to bear in mind when you're thinking of your projects that obviously there's the coronavirus pandemic and there are currently social distancing restrictions, and we don't know how long this is going to last for. And it may be those social distancing restrictions are lifted and then brought down again, and lifted and brought down again. And so you'll need to think of ideas that can work in the current climate or in the current restrictions as options. You can think of ideas that you could do outside of those restrictions as well, but I would be thinking, what project could I do within these restrictions? It's a great creative exercise. Having limitations always results in great creative solutions to problems. Okay, so you're going to need to work on your proposals over the summer. I will be asking you to submit just a kind of an outline of 1 to 2 pages of what your project is going to be, and submit that before the beginning of the first trimester, because we're going to have to hit the ground running. And that will have to include both your creative practice and your written research idea. You know, the creative practice I see as research, the written is also research, yeah? So it has to combine the both in this proposal, yeah? After this, you'll get some feedback and you'll work on a much more developed proposal in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the trimester, and then we'll go through a selection process and select which of the larger projects go through. And for those that written an idea for a 10 to 15 minute film, they may have to scale that back if their project's not selected. Yeah. In terms of assignments, your first assignment won't be until the end of the first trimester, when you will be expected to present a fully developed a development portfolio, which will be both for the creative practice and for the dissertation, which would include a literary review, an outline of your methodologies, perhaps an outline of the structure of your essay, as well as scripts, plans for your film, storyboards, a sense of what research and questions you've been asking for your film, so that to make sure that you're doing the work you need to do independently in that first trimester. Then at the end of the second trimester, you'll be expected to submit your project, both components of it, the major and the minor, and then a reflective essay after that. Okay. So I thought I'd give you, just to finish off, a couple of examples of student work that fits the kind of criteria we're looking for. Yeah. So, for example, I supervised a student a couple of years ago who did a great project. So she wanted to major in creative practice in editing. So she worked on 2 15-minute films as an editor, but she also worked on a short experimental film that someone was doing for their major as an editor as well. So overall, she had 3 films that she was working on. And then for her dissertation, she decided she was really interested in Thelma Schumacher and the way she edits and the way she talks about her editing not for physical continuity, but for emotional continuity. So she took the fight scene from Raging Bull and analysed that in detail, but also looked at the kind of rationale behind Thelma Schumacher's choice to pursue kind of emotional continuity editing, which was informed by the French New Wave. So she ended up doing a lot of research into the French New Wave and looking at films in the French New Wave and how they were edited. She then also looked at the impact Thelma Schumacher's editing had on filmmaking that happened and editing that happened after this, and found kind of a trail basically that started in the French New Wave and then was kind of brought to Hollywood or in American independent filmmaking through Thelma Schumacher and ended up in films like Black Swan. So it was a really interesting essay, and you can see how that would directly affect her own editing. So that her editing, when she was editing from that position of I'm going to edit to do with emotion and not continuity. Yeah. Another student was really interested in the work of Jordan Peele, who's from Get Out, and she found an article, an academic article by someone called Alison Landsberg, which dubbed Get Out as a horror verity. And so she read this article and started reading some of the theorists behind this article, particularly Freud and Lacan, and kind of started to look at whether there are other films that could be dubbed as a horror verity. And this all played into a film that she wanted to make about immigrants in Scotland, that she wanted to be a kind of somewhere between horror verity or horror and a kind of gritty, realistic Ken Loach type film. So those things tied in really well together. Another student wanted to do cinematography and specifically looked at the work of Roger Deakins and used a lot of Bordwell to study how, the aesthetics of Roger Deakins' cinematography, particularly his lighting of films. Another student wanted to make an experimental film about gambling addiction and decided that she was particularly inspired by Ruth Paxton's work and our own Paul Wright's work, and so decided to do a textual analysis of those 2 films, but particularly in the light of writing by Laura Marks and her kind of theories about haptic cinema that appeals directly to the senses. So, these are all the kind of things that you can do. It's really broad, and maybe this is the struggle for some of you, but I would go where your creative instincts are and start trying to find out what else has been made that's in that same context and what has been written, that's about those films that have been made that are related to your work. So you're thinking, what's my subject matter? How can I research my subject matter? How can I research the context? What kind of film is it? What films is it like? What's being said about those films? What context were they made in or are being made in? Yeah. And then technique. You can research specific technique and what that does. You can think about particular images and mise en scène, and and refer that to again, people like Lacan, or other film theorists who look at the aesthetics of cinema and make those connections, as well as looking at specific filmmakers and specific films.